I was out in rainy Ashburn, something that I did not anticipate. Definitely should have checked the forecast. That's one that I did lose, but got great stuff. Kind of getting to watch the first Dan Quinn full team practice. It was very, very interesting out there in Ashburn today. And there's so many different places I could start, but I think the most obvious one is just like the energy and the vibe out there is so much different. And it's easy to be excited when something is new. So I would be pretty stunned if it was like a dead practice. I mean, considering who Dan is. But I think what's going to be interesting is to watch that continue over the course of months and hopefully years. Can they bring this kind of energy every single day? And, Dan, obviously, his background is varied, but most directly, you say he comes from the Pete Carroll school. And this is the kind of stuff that Pete used to do. He found ways to keep the energy high. And even though it was kind of a meh day weather-wise, it's starting to rain, which, hey, it's football weather. Like, I went up to Mitch Tischler because Mitch also apparently didn't check the forecast. And so we're just standing out there with no umbrellas, no jackets, no nothing. I tap Mitch and I go, just a couple of football guys watching practice, huh? As we sit there with water dripping down our in Mitch's case, his hat, in my case, just my hair. But it was cool to see them start, and some of you might have seen this on social media with like kind of this pad drill where they put a bunch of pads down and have everybody run through them, and then they do side shuffles through them, and it like makes sense from a warm-up strength and conditioning perspective. But it also, as they do it, they're all yelling and hooting and hollering. All the coaches are in there. And it just like lets everybody kind of get ramped up and in that final moment before you go into these individual drills that are very easy to kind of slog through. And I don't want to say take for granted, but get very monotonous day over day. It's a chance to kind of get the energy up, make sure everybody's locked in, shake out any cobwebs you got, and get going. So there's little things like that from a practical standpoint, I really like how they approach football. Because at the end of the day, well, this is their jobs and it's really important to a lot of people, themselves, us, the fans, everybody. It still is a game, and finding ways to keep that lightness, to keep the core, the essence of what it is as part of the job, I think is essentially important to longevity. Because it makes people look forward to going through. And can they do this pad thing every day? No. There's going to be alternate versions of things to get going. And I've seen that in all kinds of different ways. I was watching earlier today, Caitlin Clark was mic'd up for one of the recent Fever practices, and they played a game of red light, green light. You can do Simon Says. Like, you play these games, and they're solid to kind of get people locked in mentally, to get their brain working a little bit, but while also having fun. And like, as a strength and conditioning coach or as a coach at the start of practice, you do essentially capture the flag. Like, I've seen all different kinds of versions of this, but you find ways to get the competitive juices flowing, to get people mentally involved, and to accomplish some of the stuff from a physical preparation standpoint, quick, fast feet, kind of just get the muscles firing, get everything going in a way that is great. And Dan certainly understands that. And I love to see that element on day one of practice. Then you get into the individual drills, and I, as you can imagine, spent time with the quarterbacks, and I will just relay this information. I wouldn't read anything into it, but right now Marcus Mariota is clearly QB1. He takes the first rep of every drill. Today, when they worked with the ones and the twos, they kind of had ones and threes and 7-on-7 together, and then twos and fours. I'll get to the double-barreled 7-on-7s in a little bit. But Mariota is quarterback one, as in he's taking the first rep. Does that mean that he will ultimately be QB1, especially when it didn't actually cost Jayden Daniels any reps because they were doing double of everything today, and they're working simultaneously, and the only way to know who is ones and twos is who is out there with him. So like McLaurin and Dotson, et cetera, were with Marcus Mariota. And then in the individual drills, Marcus went first. Who cares? As they progress and when they get into the training camp and they open, is Marcus Mariota taking the first snap of training camp? Then I'm interested. That tells us something about the depth chart. But for right now, not much to it. But it was cool to see Kliff work. It was cool to see him really have game-specific type of stuff in there. It's, hey, we're working on, and not that other coaches haven't, like this, quarterback drills always are going to be fairly game-specific because, well, their position translates incredibly well to the game in terms of the drills you have to do because you repeat the types of throws and footwork and things that you are going to do in the game, from rollouts to your drops to, I don't know, obviously every team does like running back handoff drills, but they focused in on certain parts of the offense, some of the quick release stuff. Hey, quick, bop, 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 throw, and there's a target to throw to with 3 different kind of mini targets within it. So it's like this big, giant rectangular thing with 3 squares that are netted, and you try to throw the ball in the net. And, watching Marcus and Jayden and Jeff Driscoll and Sam Hartman go through it was interesting. I am curious to, and we'll have some from Kliff later on in the show. We're going to bring back the pick 6 at 6. So you hear more from Kliff Kingsbury later on in the show. But I didn't get a chance to listen to his press conference because I had to jet to get back for the show. But I'd be curious to know what Kliff thinks of his footwork. And obviously, I doubt he's going to answer anything but like, hey, we're really happy. But I'm curious, Logan, he and I talked about this on Take Command that came out came out this morning. Logan is so impressed with what he sees from Daniels over the weekend in rookie minicamp. And it was just interesting comparing the footwork and the bases and some of that stuff today with Daniels to Mariota especially, but also to Hartman and to Driscoll, because Jayden is pretty upright. Like his feet were narrower than I expected based off watching him on film and kind of watching how he is in games. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a good base underneath him. And so, whereas like Hartman is super wide, and I was talking with Keim about this on the side of the field, Hartman's super wide, and I actually think he's too wide at times. Like he overstrides and doesn't have as good of a base. So this is not like by any means a criticism or whatever of Jayden. It's just like a note. It's an observation to say his feet are a little narrower than I expected, but what it allows him to do is he stays super light. Like you can see when he transitions in a drill, say that's a rollout drill, the quickness of his feet to go from like, I'm up, I'm bouncing, like I'm in my quote unquote base, to I'm out and I'm on the move. And it also allows him to really step into the throws because he's not so wide in his base that he doesn't have any room to step. And so there's like these little technique things that I think are different than I expected. But I'm curious to talk to more people that work with him or know more than me about the details of why this actually might be the ideal for someone like him. And I'd be curious, as he continues to work with Kliff, does anything change? For instance, too, with his feet, his stride length and his drop. And I know we're getting pretty granular here, but like his stride length and his drop is not as wide and as big as I would have expected, and as some of the other quarterbacks appear to be. He's also so twitchy and so bouncy that maybe he's actually, if I were to take out a tape measure, I'd be like, oh, actually he is going as far. It just looks different because he floats in the air longer. But like you want to hit a certain point in your drop. And if those steps are a little more narrow, is that dot in the pocket of where he's supposed to be something that they've accounted for with the protection and things like that. So there's like all these little granular details that I just come away with a bunch of questions after one practice. But I would imagine like they're like, yep, nope, that's perfect. That's what we want. Because his feet were something that are complimented. His feet are something that are seen as a strength coming out. The polish that he has is a positive. So it was cool to kind of see him operate in a way that looks different. But considering how much, just to be blunt, like see how much bad quarterback play I've seen covering this team over the years, I'm like, hey, different's good. Let's do different. Because he's on balance, he's light, he's quick, and he's able to snap the ball out accurately and efficiently in a way that's really impressive. And you go, oh yeah, that's why this kid blows people away when they see him operate in person. Nevertheless, the brilliant season that he put on tape at LSU in 2023. More observations from day one of Commanders OTAs today. Was out there in person. Great chance to see how things are coming together for Washington. in the earliest stage of the Dan Quinn era. And it's a good reminder, I think, that this is also the Kliff Kingsbury era, because there's some very, I would say, different, I'm guessing kind of innovative ways that they practice, although maybe some of these are just, they've been around in a bunch of different ways, and they're innovative here because the coaches that have been here previously were extremely old school in their style of coaching and the way they approach things. But it was really interesting on a number of fronts. One, I just appreciated Dan Quinn coming to the podium and being like, today's a passing game day. This whole OTA spring period is very passing game oriented because there's just an extraordinary limit on contact. And to the point that, it's not like we ever watched a Ron Rivera practice and we're like, this is so physical. This is crazy. And there was a year where they got fined, I think, for too much contact. And they just extremely regulate what they do. And so Quinn is like, we are not going to take any risks. We're not going to work on the running game stuff. And even to the point that they took it to this quote unquote extreme. And I've never seen this before, never heard of it, but it's not like I'm traveling to training camps around the country. But they actually brought the big guys in early. So they go through all their individual drills and kind of their, what I would call their on-air team drills, right? So offense only on one side, which is where I was and was watching, and whatever the heck they were doing on defense on the other side, I don't really know. I wasn't paying attention to that. Try to pay a little bit more attention to that next week. But there's no mixing, right? And then as soon as they wrap that up and they get into first a field goal thing, which, by the way, and I told you to remind me about the Nick Allegretti story, but I just remembered it. So real quick sidebar. They call field goal. Hey, we want our one field goal. It's our first team field goal unit to come up. And Nick Allegretti I'm on the sideline, and they're on the field that if you go to training camp as a Commanders fan, you're right off of that field. It's where they put the stands last year, right? So I'm standing in the usual spot where media is on that field. Allegretti and the offensive line had been working in the end zone to the left. They were lining up on the right side of the field, kicking towards the woods for field goal. Allegretti and Andrew Wiley take off in a full sprint. Field goal one. And Allegretti is screaming like a maniac. Running down the field. Wiley is doing the airplane bit, with his arms out wide running. And Allegretti is just arms pumping. I'm talking, his hand is going back past his head on the upstroke of swinging his arms like a nut, sprinting into field goal. And as he crosses midfield and he's getting he's now within 15 yards of where they're going to line up, 20 yards of where they're going to line up. He's like, I'm eligible. It's me. Wiping down the front of the jersey because he's out towards the end of the line in their field goal unit. And that's my Nick Allegretti field goal story.
I've never seen a guy so pumped for an extra point in practice.
It's amazing.
Wow.
You want to talk about getting the energy and the enthusiasm and having
great energy.
A guy like Allegretti coming off a Super Bowl, coming off a couple of Super Bowls, hey, you got to bring the leadership, you got to bring the energy. That's part of why you're here. Nick Allegretti seems like a great dude.
Okay.
Then, when they were done, this was also funny. Wiley, again, takes off sprinting. Sam Cosmi had been ahead of the pack, and Wiley just gives him a whap right on the backside as he walks by. And Cosmi kind of looks at him like, you're going to pay for that later. Oh. I don't like you right now. Nice, solid thwack on the bum.
All right.
That's the O-line report for today.
Yeah. Like they had some fun.
Yeah. And that was also the last thing they did today to bring this story full circle. We've gone on a detour. Turns out it was a big loop back to the main street we were on. After they get through the on-air stuff and they get ready to go on 7-on-7, instead of keeping the big guys out there to watch or to have them do drills on the other side of the field and just kind of keep doing the same stuff they've been doing, it's like, y'all go inside and lift and let's get you out of here, as opposed to standing outside in the rain doing nothing. And I think that's great. It's just an efficient way to practice. And so they ultimately continue this, what I would call efficient practice, with not just one side of the field doing 7-on-7s, Because in training camp, typically you do 7-on-7 on one side and your O-line, D-line, one-on-ones on the other, which are basically not allowed. There's no, you couldn't do them with any meaning this time of year because of the contact rules. And so they used both sides of the field, and they were able to get a ton of extra reps, which is something Quinn talked about before practice that would happen is, and I think happened over the weekend, is they did what I would call double barrel 7-on-7. And, on one side of the field is it looked to be the ones and the threes. So Mariota is leading that offense with Terry, Jahan, etc. Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, like the one defense is over there. The back seven was super rotating. Who's their number one corner right now? I have no idea. Like St. Juice looked like he was out there for the first rep. Forbes is coming in on that side of the field. Quan's out there. Defoe's out there. So like that's kind of the crew. Jeremy Chin had a pick. Mariota threw like 3 or 4 picks today. Defense is they'll turn you over. And Marcus Mariota's not afraid to throw a pick. So Mariota is on that side, and then Jayden Daniels is leading the other, and Jamin Davis was on the 2 field, which I thought was interesting, but he seems to be the 2 right now, and there's kind of starting linebacker rotation behind Wagner and Louvu, which makes total sense. And some of the other guys, are over there as well. Some of the younger guys, Sainer still amongst the notable names defensively over there. So you have 1s and 3s, 2s and 4s, and they're going at each other simultaneously. Kliff is calling the plays on the 1-3 side. Tavita Pritchard's got the walkie-talkie on the 2-4 side. Joe Whitt's over with the 1 side. I didn't quite see who was kind of running the defense, but I'm assuming running all the same plays. It's all scripted, but they're able to get twice the reps in. And it's just a really efficient way to do everything. Also, they had a drill going back to the on-air portion where they'd have, obviously 4 or 5 receivers out running routes, and that meant 4 or 5 footballs were in the air, right? How often do we see like, they're running routes on air and, maybe 1 or 2 guys get balls? Nope. Literally 4 quarterbacks standing shoulder to shoulder. Set hut, routes go. And 4 guys are in yellow jerseys throwing balls. And David Blau, the recently retired assistant quarterbacks coach, who's, younger probably than Marcus Mariota is, he's out there throwing bombs too. He's out there throwing rail routes to running backs out of the backfield. 30-yard drops in the bucket. Nice job, David Blau, on your rail routes today. So, like, sometimes you got 5 footballs in the air, and which means you're getting a meaningful rep on every snap for every player. And that's just a better way to practice. It's if you're out there running a route and you're probably not going to get a ball, like, are you going to be as locked in? Probably not. You'd hope so as a professional, but let's practice, tracking that ball. Let's get that skill work in. And I think this is an old air raid thing. I was DMing with our guy Mark Bullock about it because he noticed some of this from rookie minicamp over the weekend and some of the clips that came out. But, to see kind of some of the different ways that these guys coach come together, and to know that Kliff is a guy who's big on efficiency, and this is a way that you see that efficiency come to life. The number of reps that you get compared to what they got last year is just higher, which is saying something, because remember last year when Bieniemy got here, the tempo at practice was so much faster, and it's a way to get more reps and be more efficient with your time without having to just be on the ball all the time. And it takes a little bit of the pressure off, which is nice as you're learning a new offense. And so I really appreciated the way they went about this. I really appreciated, and like another thing, just is kind of wrap this up, like the way that they coach, they're clearly very good teachers. And as someone who does coaching, someone who thinks about the art of coaching a lot, there was a drill that the wide receivers were doing for blocking, and they started off with, we're just going to stand here and we're going to get our hand placement and our body position right. Then it was, okay, now let's add a couple of steps into that, break it down, get into that position. Then we take even more steps and it's a full sprint into that position. And the layering and the clear thought of how you go about teaching certain techniques, how you go about making sure that you have time on task, making sure that, as Quinn said in his pre-practice presser, that you learn the learners. Who needs more tape? Who needs more hands-on reps? Who needs to be told what to do? Understanding how these guys learn and having the options and abilities as teachers to ensure that they're going to have success is going to reap rewards. Now, whether that means that they're actually a good football team this year is still way too early to determine, because talent matters a lot. But what you have here is a coaching staff that clearly, I can tell you based off one practice, not to mention everything that they've said, understands how to maximize what they've got from a teaching standpoint. And that is a far, far cry, I think, from any coach that I've covered for the Commanders, but certainly the group that was here the last 4 years.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.